This podcast was recorded on the ancestral lands on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and the Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation.
This is Humans on Rights, a podcast advocating for the education of human rights. Here's your host, Stuart Murray.
Today, we're diving into a subject that touches each and every one of us, the clothes we wear. Behind every t-shirt, every pair of jeans, every dress is a story. And often, that story raises big questions about human rights, sustainability, and the impact of fast fashion. My guest today is Winnipeg-based fashion designer Andréanne Mulaire, co-founder of Anne Mulaire. And she has built her work on values of sustainability, cultural pride, and ethical production. So in a world where fashion dominates, Andréanne is showing us another way, one where respect for people, culture, and the planet is stitched into every garment. So on that basis, Andréanne Mulaire, welcome to Humans on Rights.
Bonjour. Thank you for including me in this wonderful podcast.
Ça me fait plaisir. Andréanne, just to sort of, for those listeners, can you introduce yourself a little bit and explain what it is that you do?
Yeah. So my name is Andréanne Mulaire d'Andenot, and but I go by the name of Anne, and that's why the company is named after my great-great-grandma, my Métis ancestor, Catherine Mulaire. So we named our company Anne Mulaire, and we actually create women's wear in Winnipeg that are sustainable, but that also tells the story of our Métis culture. It's something that I started 20 years ago. This year we've been in business. And when I started my company 20 years ago, it was always around sustainability. This is the way I was brought up. It has always been engraved in me about taking care of the planet. But also, it was a conscious decision when I started the company, what kind of impact I wanted to do. And there was two. One was to take care of the planet. Somehow, I didn't know then what that entailed. I just knew that I wanted to reduce waste. That was my number one sentence. And number two was to be proud of who I am and never forget where I came from. So if you fast forward 20 years later, there's a lot of decisions that I've made along the years that, decisions as continuing production in Winnipeg, in Canada, knitting my own fabric in Canada, keeping the story of my ancestor alive, which 20 years ago, a lot of people did not want to buy products where my dad designed the indigenous designs because it wasn't a positive impact or a positive thing that people wanted to connect to. But then you see 20 years later how it's, the stories are thriving. People want to know more about indigenous people in Canada. Always staying true to me and saying, no, I will continue, even though it's not the best time, I will continue to kind of thrive forward. And also being, every decision I make about sustainability, how do I make my clothing, the way I design, why do I create zero waste products when sometimes those are very costly because you're reusing fabric, but the labor is intensive. But it's a value that my parents have definitely embedded in me when I was a little girl and that I carry with me and who makes Anne Mulaire. And to the point of today, sometimes I think back and as much as it is hard to run a business that does everything in a way, not the wrong way, but in order to have, a big profit in your pocket, I don't think that was my big purpose, was to have a multi-million-dollar company with a lot of dollars in my pocket. It was always, I wanted to be a CEO that created an impact versus a CEO that just had millions and nothing. So that's my personal purpose and why we're still in business, why a lot of customers are finding ways to really relate to us and believe in what we're doing and support it, because you feel good when you're supporting a good company doing good, right? So we're kind of that transition company that helps customers either finding themselves with their background, their ancestors or indigenous background, or also those that want to kind of move forward or shift from fast fashion to slow fashion to sustainable fashion. And how do they do that? Who do they trust? What steps do they take? Can they do baby steps, or can they learn along the way? And just one more thing to add. Our family, Mulaire family, is a long lineage family of entrepreneurs. I have my great-great-grandpa worked along Louis Riel, and my Catherine Mulaire was the first rural teacher in design. She taught how to do la broderie. I forgot now how you say that in English. Broderie. Yeah, because she was taught by the nuns in Quebec. So she came back. That's a big story, but you can read it on my website. And generation passed, and then I have an uncle that started a business and another uncle. And so I kind of have that in my blood, this entrepreneur, voyageur, trading. And so I take it, I'm very grateful that I have it in my blood. And so for me, was education, because I find like all my grandparents always said, education is very important. So another part of the company that I really thrive on, and I really want to make sure that customers can relate to, is the education of fashion, of history, of, like you said in your intro, of storytelling, because it is so true. I love how you actually added that in the intro, is that every piece of clothing have a story. It's either, if you buy it offshore, somewhere else, and it's a little boy or a little girl that made it, it has a story. It might not be the good story, and it could be a very sad story, but it has a story. And it's this concept of acknowledging that and saying, where does this clothing come from? Where does this fabric come from? And asking questions, where is this made? You know? Yeah,
no, listen, it's fascinating. Thank you so much, Andréanne. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned, I'd like to just explore a bit with you, is you talk about how your designs are rooted in sustainability and Indigenous culture. And I just wonder, you talked a little bit about how those values guide your work, but perhaps why do you think it's important that you continue to do that? And I just think for anybody who's listening to this podcast, would wonder, why are you still doing that today? And why do you believe it's important to stick to those cultural values?
Yeah, very good question. Well, I think it's no secret that our planet is warming up, and something that's happening on this planet that we are consuming so much. And so when I said at the beginning of starting my company, I wanted to reduce the waste in the industry, because we have a problem with waste. There's a lot of waste. We're discarding clothing like nothing today, and it's creating an impact on our climate. You could see the climate changing, and I don't want to dive too much into it, but it is real. A lot of people think it's not, but it is 100% real. And if we can't take care of it today, and I know one business like myself, a small business, it won't make a huge impact, but when everybody does small steps, it creates a bigger impact. So for me, it's, nature has always been very important to me, because we all walk on this land. And if we're not respecting it or even taking care of it, it will just disappear. So I think that's number one, is, to be very mindful of our planet, to really take care of it. And what we buy, what we discard, what we throw away every week, how do we recycle? Those are all impact that we're creating on this planet. And if we can make little changes in our lives, then we can all create, we can actually, see a better temperature. We need to do something. And there's a lot of environmental advocates that have great information and even stats about what's happening in the next 10 years. And then aside from that is, the whole identity and the respect heritage, that's another part of human rights. Like you say, it's a part of who you are. It's about us respecting everybody. And, there's so much war in this world. Like there's no reason why we can't respect different nationalities. And so it comes down to, for me, I want to try to invite and also inspire others to respect others and to accept themselves. And so that's a huge thing about pride. Be proud of yourself, be proud of other cultures, respect the cultures. They all have significance. So, sometimes I find it's pretty simple. It's just respect other people, but I try to do it. I try to walk the walk and talk the walk.
It is pretty simple to respect other people. It's just, for whatever reason, very difficult, which that's for a whole other podcast, I must tell you. So one of the things, Andréanne, that is, you mentioned some of the stats, and I just pulled this one out that said that every year there's 92 million tons of waste with respect to clothing. And you're talking about how you want to, and you've been looking at from a sustainability and how you run your company. Just from your perspective, Andréanne, so how did you, like as a young person, were you not sort of swept up in what the latest fashion was? And I want to ask that question on the basis, I want to move into this term fast fashion and what does it mean? And for those that might not know or heard about it, I want to get into that conversation. But for most young people, young boys, young girls growing up, there's a lot of fashion conscience that gets thrown at you that, you get swept up in. Did that ever happen to you, or did you always have this sort of sense from your parents, your grandparents, that wasn't what you wanted to be participating in?
Yeah, you know what? To be honest, it was. I was brought up just buying what we needed and not more. So it's been embedded in me not to be, a consumist and buying a lot. Even when I started before I started my company, I used to be a contemporary dancer, and that was the fork I was going into, either be a full contemporary dancer professionally or continuing with design. And I remember the costumes we had to buy for one concert, and they were polyester, uncomfortable. And so that's where I actually started to make clothing. I started to make our own costumes. First of all, they were expensive, they were uncomfortable, and they were polyester. So I just started doing that. And then it was just kind of dawned on me how people reacted and said, oh my God, this is amazing. This is better. So when I started my company, it was always, I want to work with natural fibers. I don't want to go out there and make others things. Another pointer is at school, when I did my design school in Montreal, we often were geared towards polyester. And because I knew from dance what the comfort part of polyester, how it breathed and not. And I had also done human ecology at U of M, and I did more of a textile focus. So I had also that background of, the behind the scene, what happened in factories and the fabric notion. I was able to kind of make decisions right there at school. And we did so many samples per week. So having that knowledge, and then going into starting my business, I kind of knew already I wanted to work with natural fibers. Now, I didn't know where I was getting that fabric, so I started buying overseas the fabric. And then what happened is I started to have allergies. I was working because I was sewing so much at the beginning, and I started having allergies, and my hands were just so, they were hurting and they were puffy and itchy. And so I knew something was weird and wrong. And so I would talk to my parents, say, I don't know what's happening, but I'm having reactions. So then I sent samples to U of M, where they had a lab at that time. And they were able to see what kind of chemical, what kind of fabric was I working with. And I was supposed to work with organic cotton, but it turned out to be a conventional cotton with, some treated chemicals in there. So that made, so everything that happens, I've always kind of figured out, okay, what is happening? Why is this happening? And then I take a step forward and I'm like, okay, I need to figure out, how do I get fabric from Canada? Because we have higher regulations, and I could control it more because I could just take a flight, go to the knitter, and then see them. So that's where I decided to start. I went to Ontario, and then I even met with Craig Kilberger, which is Free the Children. And he said, I've worked with these kind of manufacturer in Toronto or in Ontario. I think you should go and see them. So I did. And that's the starting point of my first decision of making our fabric in Canada. And then we decided to make in Winnipeg because I can control the batch. I can control the production. And I think at that point too, I was so small. I didn't want to start dealing with someone in China or overseas. I just thought, it'd be nice to just work with someone in Winnipeg, drive there, see how my products are being sewn, and just work like that. But over the years, of course, I've had business associates saying, why are you still making it in Winnipeg? You got to go overseas to get a better profit. But over the years, I've just realized how the value of making something in Winnipeg, giving jobs to people in Winnipeg around me, being able to control the quality was just way more a value factor than anything else. And then along, every step along the way of the company, I have made decision in terms of, in 2018, I think we decided to look at our supply chain to really dive in and see where our products are, where's the fabric, the yarn getting from to where it's getting knitted, to dyeing, to Winnipeg, to shipping, to the customer, to see actually how much carbon emission are we using, how much water are we using, how much energy are we using. And that's not something a lot of people will do because it costs money to do this whole. But for me, it was important to, I think like I said before, proof's in the pudding, and you have to walk the walk to talk the walk. And showing this on our site, being very transparent, is the one way to show your customers what you're doing is real. Because it's so easy to greenwash, to kind of say, I'm green, but really, when you dive more into it, are you saving? Yeah.
Right.
And so,
are you really green?
Yeah. Sure.
So, Andréanne, let me just come back to a couple of things. One of the things, when you went to Montreal and you were studying and you were working with a lot of polyester at that time. Why? What was the magic of polyester in terms of design and clothing?
Well, this is where they would bring us to a fabric, like a fabric store where we had to buy our own fabric, and that's what they were offering. And so I was always trying to look for something. I remember I made a skirt in wool, and it was supposed to be we were supposed to do a skirt we had different themes. And at that point, we had bar themes, like if you're going to the bar.
Sure.
And I remember I said, no, I don't want to make a bar skirt. I'm going to make a wool skirt. It's very Ralph Lauren. And I had made it lined, and it was checkered, and I looked around my classmate, and everybody had made these cute little, skirt that are so short and blah, blah, blah. I made this like Louis, Christian Dior / Ralph Lauren, wool skirt. So for me, it was always, I was looking at timeless styles, at things that, I was trying to use natural fibers and create a product in that fabric. And I think another thing that really inspired me to move into the sustainable world was at school when I had to do my last exam, we had to do a couture dress. And I remember I picked the wolf as my inspiration. And I had told my teachers that I wanted to make this dress out of hemp. And they said, well, don't be surprised if it doesn't go on the runway, because that's not runway fabric. So that, of course, I took the challenge and I said, I'll make you sure it will go on the runway. So I went and I searched everywhere in Canada and the US for hemp jacquard, hemp silk. I said, no, I'm going to find hemp, but in the very glamorous way. And I did. I sourced it all by myself with my own money, and I made the dress, and they were so stunned. So I think that reaction showed me that I could do something with what I wanted to show the world that obviously did not believe in.
So when you said, just a comment back when you said you were going to make something with hemp and they said it won't make the runway, were they basically criticizing, or not criticizing, but making an observation, just saying that, no matter how good it is, that product is not something that people want to see on the runway? Was it a design issue, Andréanne? I'm trying to figure out if it was a design or if it was the fabric and people saying, well, people are not going to buy product that's made out of hemp.
I think it was more their understanding of what hemp was. And for them, they probably thought it was a raggedy fabric. Maybe they've seen styles in the past that look very, very relaxed, very décontracté, not fashion worthy. So for me, it was more of a knowledge of fabric. Can that fabric be transformed into something glamorous? I don't think so. So that belief of a very narrow-minded, because you have to be open-minded to think that hemp could become on a runway. Like even if I ask someone today, do you think hemp can be a runway worthy? And I'm sure a lot of people would say, no, because they don't think it can be transformed into silk, into different, like a beautiful scarlet red. And I had gold and you thought it was silk, but it was actually made out of hemp.
And so, just take us backstage for a second. I mean, obviously you are marching to a different drummer. You're doing something, you're passionate about. People are wondering if it's going to work. When you produce this product, Andréanne, do you get a chance to put it on the model? Like, I'm just wondering, what was their reaction when you showed them what they were going to wear? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when the exam happens, you create the design and then you have to find your model and then you have to put the dress on the model and then you come into the room, you show the dress to the teachers. You have a book too, that you have a sketch, you have all your fabric and you show each fabric what they are, kind of a sketchbook that represents your design. And so that's exactly what I did. And then they said, no, this is not hemp. And I said, this is hemp. And then I actually even kept the tag, the fabric tag, because I was worried. I'm like, oh, I don't know if they're going to believe me. So I did. And they could not believe it. It was 3 teachers that did the exam, the rating. And they said, I've never seen this before. And you are going on the runway. And I was so excited. But,
I bet.
Yeah, but it was just one of those things that I'm like, man, if I could prove them wrong, who else can I prove wrong,
For sure. And so, well done. And thanks for sharing that. I just think that, there's so many, you see, through social media and different things, all these runways, all these models, all these things that happen. And I mean, some of it, the clothing is quite extraordinary. And, when you do something as you did, which went against the grain and produced a product, a material that even they didn't recognize, that's really probably inside. I mean, it's a validation of who you are and what you believe. But, that's a great story to share. And so Andréanne, tell us now a little bit about sort of this term fast fashion and how, what does it mean? How is Anne Mulaire, your company, how are you showing a different way to those people who want to look good, feel good in clothing, but are not necessarily caught up in this term fast fashion? What is fast fashion to start off?
Mm-hmm. Well, fast fashion is exactly how it's said. It's fast fashion. It's like fast food. If somebody wants to understand what we all know what fast food is, not really healthy for you. It's made really fast and it's low quality. And so fast fashion is the same. It's made overseas in abundance, a big manufacturer that uses people not paid well, no windows. It's a very poor condition. They get paid almost nothing and they have no benefit. Like it's really the worst condition possible for manufacturing, but it costs maybe 10 cents for 10 products. So for the big companies, like I'm not going to name them all, but you can definitely find them online. You see they will take a bigger profit because their products are so cheap and so,
right.
Not expensive. But what happens is people just discard those pieces because they're not made. The fabric is not really quality. We all know We've had a t-shirt in our lives that just came apart, or when you washed it, it just twisted for some reason. Well, that's all part of the low quality, because people are trying to make something very fast, cheaply. And what's happening is when you buy something that's cheap, that's not expensive, then you start not to care as much. So you purchase it, you're like, meh, just cost me $5, $10, whatever the cost is. I'll just throw it away and buy a new one. Well, that's the consumption part that is really concerning me, because that's where we're getting too much. We're wasting so much for no reason. You know, you think of in the past how people had one great outfit for the Sunday mass or something, and you wore that outfit all the time, and they took care of that outfit, and they washed it properly. Well, your cost per wear was like almost zero, or even in the minus. But when you think about something that you buy not expensive and not made from a company that, or made from a company that, just want profit, your cost per wear probably will be more expensive because you'll wear it once and you throw it away. So that's another part that we've been trying to, educate our customers is sometimes you invest in a piece that, yes, it might be a lot of, it's expensive at the beginning, but your cost per wear, because you're going to wear it so often during the year, or, have it for 5 to 10 years, it will cost you almost nothing. And that's a good thing to, it's a good investment, basically.
And so, again, just to come back to kind of fast fashion, particularly from a human rights perspective, I think what you're saying is that a lot of those pieces of clothing are manufactured with child labor, or people that are not being treated properly, or they're working in factories with no windows in terms of working environments. So from a human rights perspective, you would say that fast fashion is something that does not respect human rights.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Yeah. And then slavery too happens, especially in fabric, like in the picking the cotton. There's a lot of cases with slavery around the fabric, bamboo sometimes. So when, those are all things that I really paid attention to, even where we got our cotton or our bamboo. I had to make sure that our factory were slavery free. I had to use those word to get certification.
Even today, Andréanne, I mean, in 2025?
Even today.
So you have to use the term slavery free?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Really?
Yeah, I had to. Yeah. Just to get that certification, because you want to make sure it is very clear what you're buying. I think what's happening now more than ever is there's so many loopholes. So you have to be very clear on what you're asking for and do a lot of due diligence.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, which you've done, because, just even at the outset of this podcast, you talk about you thought you were getting cotton, and you found out that it was, giving you sort of rashes or whatever, and you kind of had to test it and realized, not as advertised, right? That's not what you were getting.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think, all of that is really, really interesting to find, because I'm glad, I was going to say, when I first heard the term fast fashion, which you've explained, but Andréanne, when I first heard it, I thought it was just that people were just sort of rotating their product because, well, all of a sudden this is out of fashion, this in the summer fashion and fall fashion. And, so you're just discarding things. And that's where, we have this incredible waste that is somewhere in the desert in, I don't know if it's in Peru or whatever, but, people can go online and be pretty shocked if they're interested. But, you also say, I love the way you talk about it, likening it to fast food, because that's very, very similar. Something we understand as fast food and fast fashion. So, one of the things that I'd love to get your sense of is you have clearly decided that you're going to use, sustainability, and we talked about it at the beginning, Indigenous culture, into what you create and how you do that. At the very beginning, Andréanne, was the waste in the fashion industry, was that something that was done because of the speed they wanted to create it, or was it just that people looked at a piece of cloth that they had and said, well, I only need 80% of it and the other 20% we don't have use for? What kind of is, if you have the ability, the question I hope is fair to you, to explain, where did the waste start to come from in the fashion industry?
Well, the waste comes often, there's two parts. There comes from the manufacturing sector, where when you bulk cut and you make a lot of clothing, then you have a certain amount, like you said, that you don't use. So that's been discarding and it just throws away in the garbage. And then the second part of waste is when we just throw away our garments because we're just like, I'm tired and I want to buy a new one. That for me is waste too. So there's those two components. And also just to go back into the fast fashion, the one thing that I always ask customers is when a product is so cheap, it's like $5, there's a reason for that. And because fast fashion is all about the big companies, what they do is they pump these manufacturers and say, I need 1,000 designs per week. I need 3,000 per day. And so all they're doing is they're working their ass off just to make their demands. And that is why you're super right on. It's huge on human rights. And that's a big reason why I want to make the clothing in Winnipeg, because I can control the wages. I can control the environment. I can control the respect too. There's still manufacturers in Canada that, you'll be surprised to know that they're not respected or their benefits are not being paid. So things like that are still going in the manufacturing sector. But to talk about more of the waste, so those two components, when I noticed I was making our garments in, I had a manufacturer I was working with on Logan
in Winnipeg, Logan Street in Winnipeg. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so a lot of the manufacturers are closed now, but 20 years ago, that's how I started before opening my own. And I remember, and this is where it really triggered me when I saw them cutting for another company and they were just piled up. And then they had a big chunk and they threw it away in the garbage. And I said, well, how much garbage bins do you guys throw every week? Oh no, that's today. They have like 4 or 5 every day. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is like in Winnipeg. This is locally. So that was another big thing, to open my own manufacturer for me to control my own waste. So when we do have waste from a production, either one that we have a laser cutter, and then we also have a hand cutter employee. And having those two techniques, we're able to save, 80% of our fabric, because the hand cutter will hand cut orders that are custom from these scraps that are the remnants that we get from our big production. And the production will do our zero waste collection. So if I wasn't controlling that, for sure, this would all go in the garbage and then toss, because it's faster, it's easier.
Right.
It's the same thing if we want to compare it to recycling. It takes effort to put your different recycling products in the different recycling bin. I often say that when I do presentations with students, I try to give them this analogy of what does that look like, the effort of recycling, because that's what we do at Anne Mulaire. Well, it takes an effort, and you put the correct bin or the correct product in the correct bin. And yeah, you got to think about it, you got to wash it and put it in. But at the end, you're actually doing a better service to your planet and to the whole purpose of recycling than just put everything in one recycling bin. And then that goes to the recycling plant, and then they can't even use it. So it gets discarded. There's no, it's the whole reason of the whole recycling. So I went off a little thing there, but
Yeah, no, that's okay. No, because what's interesting is that, having done a little bit of research on Anne Mulaire, your company, as it's called, you make product for people that could be extra small to extra large. You don't look at body shape and say, we don't do that. You look at it and say, whatever body shape you have, we will make sure that we make a product for you that you're going to believe in and feel good about and stick to your core principles of sustainability and culture. So when you look at that though, Andréanne, somebody might just say, yeah, but how when it's one thing if you make, everything medium or if you make everything large. But if you can go from all of those sizes, how does that impact your ability to control how much waste you have when you've got so much variety in what it is that you make of the same product?
That's a good question. So first of all, I always believe that sustainability is for everyone. It's not just for a certain person. It's not for a certain, price point too, because we offer a resale program, which gives you a different entry point. We also have another collection. It's called the Green Sale, which gives you sustainability on a budget, basically. But, the whole sizing chart from double extra small to 6X. So this is a business tactic. This is what I've learned, over the years. How do you maneuver this and how do you manage this as a business perspective? And we have some of the sizes like the double extra small, or when it comes to 3 to 6X, you can pre-order it. So we'll do it on demand. And this is where my one of the cutter associates, she will hand cut from the remnants. And then everything else is we do smaller bulk orders because we know those are the most popular size. So I pick and choose sometimes. I have to pick and choose what colors, what styles do we bulk cut in, and some do we do one-ofs. And we just, whenever that order comes through the online, then we cut. Or somebody comes into the boutique and say, hey, I would like this. You don't have it in stock? Sure, we'll cut it. And I think you have to pick and choose sometimes like that in order to maximize a bit of your fabric or also, your business.
So can people buy product from you online?
Oh, yeah. We have our online website, and you can even customize. So that's another part of our business that we really worked on and developed is our customization. Because again, everybody's different, and we have tall, petite, we have in between. And because we own our own manufacturer, we can offer that service. So you can go and order a pair of leggings. Those are one of the most popular pieces that we sell. And you can have it long and you can have it short, you shortened, and you select your inseam online.
Right. And so just quickly, I will put these into the show notes for sure, Andréanne, but what is your website?
It's AnneMulaire.ca.
AnneMulaire.ca. Okay, fantastic. And do you primarily focus on women's clothing?
Yes. Today, yeah, we do women's clothing.
And do you ever look at saying at some juncture you may look at doing men's clothing?
I've had more and more requests, so that might be something. Yeah, I'm definitely a woman designer because I did my training in women, but I would want to make sure that I can represent the men too.
So I won't use this podcast as sign a petition to get, we need men's clothing from Anne Mulaire. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, but it's interesting because it's something, again, it speaks to your passion. It speaks to your level of interest. And, you are a women-only company in the sense, I think, of who your team is that makes your product. How do you decide what you're going to make? Say, are you thinking about what product you want to make for the spring of, say, 2026, or how far out do you plan? And tell us a bit about that process from your perspective. Again, not from mass producing, but from how you talk about sustainability and the culture that you have brought to your business.
Well, when it comes to designing, a season, I do a season ahead. So I'm in the works of working on my spring 2026. Being a designer, a sustainable designer, sometimes I have internal conflicts because I'm working against, what is happening out there, which is they're just pumping a lot of design and they have trends and our customers are seeing all these advertisement, they seeing all these these magazines that have all the cool trends in. So you can't go totally off trend. So because then your customers will say, well, no, that's not in trend. So I can't buy that color. So you got to dance with this. And I've learned to kind of dance with that, with what's happening outside and what I can offer. But I always try to do it mindfully. So this past collection for fall 2025, it was all about remembering the land And for me, I wanted to bring back some older styles, things that have worked really well in the past, but also just sprinkle a few new pieces. Because for me, when my customers buy from another season, I want them to be able to buy another piece this season, but they can blend it together. So then they can build their wardrobe versus buying a new wardrobe every season. That's not the way I design.
Yeah.
And so that's, I've been doing that for a few years. I think in 2018, when we started doing more trade shows where we travel across Canada and the US to sell to art shows, I noticed that, I didn't have to always create a new collection because I have new eyeballs seeing pieces that, I had it last year, but for them it's new. And what I have to focus on is the style correct? Is the fit correct? Is it comfortable? Are customers loving it or not loving it? What can I tweak to make it better? And those are the components that I use for designing. And sometimes I'll get inspired by, a new color coming through and I'll always ask myself, well, is this a color that somebody could buy and will wear for a few years? Or is this a in and out one season kind of thing? Because I don't have interest in just a one season thing. I've always been someone that likes classic pieces, but timeless too. So I guess it relates on my brand. And
yeah, no, for sure. So you mentioned a little bit about reusable, right? Mm-hmm. And so I know you've got different programs that I'd love you to share with the listeners some of the things that you've done. So if somebody has a piece that, again, maybe it doesn't fit them quite right anymore, or there's something's happened, what can they do with your company, with that product that you have already made?
So in 2021, we launched Return to Nature program because we talk about sustainability, but the future of fashion has to be circular. From the start, it has to make a whole circle. So when I design, I always look back on the end day, on the end first, and say, well, how is this going to be discarded? And I work my way up, or I work my way back, or something like that.
Circular. Yes, I hear you. Yeah.
And so we created 6 programs that would kind of bring life back to our garments. So the first program is the Refresh program, where customers can bring back, and I see a lot of leggings in this, where they bring back leggings and we will refresh them, retake the seams, fix the little holes. So we get a brand new legging for a new season. So it really expands the life of your garment. These are 6 programs. The second one is the resale program. So if something is just not, you've had it for a couple of years and you're just not wearing it, or your body changed and it doesn't fit, you can bring it back and then we will give you credit for another piece of Anne Mulaire. But what this resale program does is it creates a lower entry for other people's wanting to invest in Anne Mulaire. And they can test out with these beautiful, we clean them up and we make sure that they're all very shopping worthy. Another program is called the Revive program, and that is where we take other products from, customers will bring in a jacket, or we'll just take different products and we'll upcycle. So kind of use our remnants and revive it or upcycle it. It's basically an upcycle program. We have the Zero Waste program, where we do it twice a year and we reuse our own remnants from our production, and we'll create 100 pieces, and they're one of a kind. And every year this is where I have fun with, because I'll go and create something that's a little bit outside the box. And it's more, it was like creating costumes when I was doing dance. I just kind of go a bit crazy on those pieces, but because they're one of a kind and they're fun. So, and then we have the downcycle. The downcycle program, we actually donate. So we have people coming every day, and we put aside some remnants where they can come and use it for free. So we actually donate our remnants to whoever wants to do their own projects. And then we also have our Fiber Lab, and that is, I have our head of sustainability, Jody Benson. And so she has worked with different knitters that have taken our own waste and created a new yarn. So we have socks. They're called waisted socks. And we've used our own waste to create these socks. And we're working on beanies and our long-time project would be to create our own fabric. So we're not buying new fabric all the time. So you can see how that circle kind of closes up. And then, there's like infinity great projects ahead that we want to do, but in time.
Andréanne, your brand emphasizes ethical production, right? I mean, that's really what does that look like sort of in a day-to-day operation?
Well, ethical production means, first of all, that the employees paid fairly in Winnipeg. That's for our manufacturer in Winnipeg. That is, she is respected. We do check-ins. We give them benefits. We have team building opportunities. Yeah, and that they feel like they're happy to come to work. And I think that's one of our big question when we do our check-ins is, are you happy when you come to work? And they're all saying, this is going to be my work forever. And I'm surprised because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, it's going to be a long journey. But hey, when you hear that, I think, and the conditions too, that's a huge thing to have the right conditions, to have big windows. For us, I was always adamant that I wanted big windows in my manufacturer for them to feel like they're in an office too, it's not just a underground dungeon. It's somewhere that they can feel proud to be. Everybody has their sewing section and it's their little office, and they have some pictures and I walk around and I'm very proud. So I think that's a good sign when you walk around.
Yeah, no, for sure. When people are happy, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, so Andréanne, were you able to still work like that through COVID?
Well, we had to shut down at the beginning in March, I think, when everything was shut down. And then we started doing masks, and that went viral. So then because we started doing masks, we were able to bring some sewers back because we're doing they allowed the mask production to happen. But at that point, I only had 400 square feet of my manufacturer.
Wow.
So the other people that was renting from the same space, they closed down. And so fortunately, I was able to take over their space. And then that's where today we have 2,000 square feet. And I was able to kind of get the space. But it's interesting how COVID, it allowed me to grow, to create growth. And I knew I needed space because we were working in a small, tight space before that. But I'm happy that it happened.
Yeah, no kidding. But I mean, not that COVID has been positive for lots of people, but there are ways that for some, that it has helped them grow and help them adjust, or however it was, as you explained in your particular business, and somebody was not able to continue or chose not to continue, and it gave some space that you were able to sort of get involved in. So, for Anne Mulaire, the company, that was a very positive opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So I want to ask you a little bit about what are some of the barriers to producing clothing sustainably and fairly?
Well, definitely barriers would be the profit margins. That's huge. I think that's probably the biggest one. Always competing against fast fashion where the price point is lower and you're trying to compete with this, but you can't because you're doing everything right. To be honest, I think that's the biggest one. And, just to have a biggest microphone to tell the world, to have the budget of marketing that other big brands have. Well, you don't, because at the end of the day, a lot of the profit, you're reinvesting it in your own company and in supporting your staff and sustainable initiatives. So you're almost, putting that in there versus,
Yeah. So what role, if you look at yourself as an independent designer, what role do you feel you can play in kind of shifting the way that the industry has been operating?
Well, I guess just continuing to tell my story, to share my story, but also to invite other business owners to try to do the same so we can kind of work as a collective. And hopefully, with the government, if they see that this is important and customers find this is important, there will be more initiative to support Canadian businesses and to support manufacturing in Canada. Because imagine if more people manufactured in Canada, we would have small hubs everywhere and we would have our thread companies back. We would have our all the notions, the needles, they all left. Like, we used to have so many in Winnipeg, and now we have to order from other provinces or even out of country. I used to be able to just drive to the little shop and buy my needles for my machines. So things like that, it's awareness, and, it's a lot of awareness and seeing, okay, if somebody's doing this here, any new companies starting up, maybe being inspired of the path I've taken and say, okay, I think I could do it also, or maybe we can work together. Or
yeah, I think that Winnipeg has been known for years and years as a place where there were a tremendous number of garment facilities, and you see that change. But I think, again, it speaks to your perseverance, your creativity, your entrepreneurship, as you say, with your runs in your family, that you're still striving and thriving and continuing to grow your business. Andréanne, I am delighted. I look at always sort of these conversations with a little bit of an hourglass, and as the last sands kind of start to find themselves at the bottom of the hourglass, I just want to say, how thrilled and delighted I am to speak with you. If somebody's listening and saying, I love what she's saying, I'm so motivated by what she's saying, and I really want to find a way to look at sustainability and bring some kind of sense of culture to the way I would design, how would you tell them to go about pursuing that dream?
Well, first of all, it's all about yourself, what you believe in, because if you don't care about the environment, then it will be hard for you to do something for the environment. So I always say, whatever speaks to you, there's always ways to find a way to reduce waste within whatever you're doing. So one thing I often tell any companies is we're all responsible for our own waste. And this could be a really good area of creativity where you think outside the box and find ways to reuse your waste somehow, or donate or do something. Not doing something is worse. So, it's hard for me to say where they would go. There's so many different avenues online that you can find ways to redesign, repurpose. But sometimes I struggle with that too. So, to be honest, it's an ever changing way of designing, and things always happen, and there's another, either a new fabric comes along, and you're always trying to figure it out. But exactly,
do the dance,
but I think trying to do it, that's what you got to start doing.
Yeah.
You can't just wait for it to come to you. You just got to test, try, do something, ask people around you, what's your input? What's your input? What do you think about this?
Yeah. So I did say one last, and I just thought of another one. So I'm going to just ask you, who's your favorite? Do you have a favorite designer?
I have a few. One that I really like, it's Ralph Lauren. And I think it's because of the way he blends old and new. I find that very romantic, the vintage and the history, the Western. So I look at the aesthetics sometimes of designers. I don't look at just the garments or the fabrics. It's really how they make you feel, how they present themselves in public and things like that. I've always liked Stella McCartney because she's very avant-garde in terms of the sustainable world and more of a sporty. But yeah, I find I have a couple that I kind of keep an eye out and I see what kind of feeling what kind of emotion are they giving out this year, and that's how I feed off of it.
Andréanne, one of the things that occurred to me is you're always looking for input, for feedback from different things. If somebody wanted to give, or something was said in this podcast that you were looking for, what would you like them to do?
I would love for them to, if they have a question about something I've said, or they would want to get an answer, more elaborated answer, if they just, send us a question or ask us if there's anything that they want, something more elaborated.
And would they go to your website to do that? Andréanne, is that the best?
Yeah, they can go to our website and contact us and send us an email.
Excellent.
Any questions you have, I'm an open book and I love to answer any questions that customers have or audience have.
That's fantastic. I was so looking forward to this conversation because I knew there would be so much that I could learn. And, just a little bit of research I did on your website, and I heard, that there was so many things that I was going to ask you about. You talked about goal 9, goal 12, goal 13 out of the 3 UN goals. I would just say if anybody wants to find out about those, they should go to YouTube and they should look you up because you're very passionate about that. This has been a really, really wonderful conversation, and I just want to say merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for taking the time to jump onto Humans on Rights. I really appreciate it.
Mon plaisir, Stuart.
Thanks for listening to Humans on Rights. A transcript of this episode is available by clicking the link in the show notes of this episode. Humans on Rights is recorded and hosted by Stuart Murray. Social media marketing by Buffy Davey. Music by Doug Edmond. For more, go to humanrightshub.ca.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.